We'll go ahead and dismiss the children at this time. They're going to head upstairs for children's worship. And we're starting this morning just a short series for the next next 4 weeks rather, asking the question, how did we get here? And today we're asking that in the big way, existence. How did we get here in general? We're here, right? How did that happen? We're asking that today, but sometimes we ask that question in other ways, don't we? Like when you get to a certain place in a relationship and you just say, how did we get here? Or a certain place in your job or whatever it is, just how did I end up here? How did we get here? And over the next few weeks, we're going to be thinking about those things from the book of Genesis in the Bible, the first 3 chapters, just to kind of take some time and just sit back, look at the big picture today, and then just see how as we navigate life, when we understand where we came from, that makes sense of everything in life. And so that's what we'll be doing here for the next 4 weeks as we think through this. So if you're not there already, you can turn to Genesis chapter 1. It's easy because it's the first book of the Bible, so it's nice and easy to find. Some of you may look it up on your phone as well. We're going to be moving through a large portion of the Bible today, a lot of verses. Sometimes we really just focus on one and really try to make sure we understand everything in that one verse. And today we're going to be moving through a lot of verses here quickly. And so you may want to follow along in your Bible here especially today, as always, but especially today. The very first 4 words of the Bible say this: in the beginning, God. Now, not every human would say that. If you just put the words out there, in the beginning, blank, fill in the blank. There are multiple ways that is answered, right? As you think about people on the planet and you say, in the beginning, what happened? Where did all of this come from? How did all of this start? There are multiple answers to that, right? Because the reality is, scientifically, we can observe things and how this works, but the scientific method observes what's reproducible so you can prove it, right? And we can't reproduce our origins. We cannot reproduce the beginning. And so the way we answer this question reveals the way you view the world, the way you view everything in life. And so if you believe that you were made by a personal being who made you because he loves you and wanted to share who he is and his essence with you in relationship, that changes the way you live. If you don't believe that, if you believe that we are the result of some pre-existing substances that were around forever and had no beginning, then that's going to affect the way you live too, right? See, one gives you a relational bent to life, one gives you a non-relational utilitarian bent. And I think we're going to see that the one that's the relational bent that brings about the beauty of all of that just is all over the first pages of the Bible. And so this is a question really of what is the lens in which you view the world? What is your worldview as we look through this? And the first 4 words of the Bible, if this is God's word and we take it for that, it will settle it for us if we take that by faith and we respond to that by faith. Hebrews 11:1 says it this way: by faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things which are visible. And so by faith is how we understand that, right? So faith is how we connect to unseen realities, is what Hebrews 11:3 tells us. Faith is how we connect to unseen realities. And that's true in everything, isn't it? And so if I promise you something, then you don't see me doing it, you're just trusting that I'm doing it. If I promised my parents when I was a kid that I was going to clean up my room and they weren't in my room watching me, then by faith, they could understand that I was doing it unless they didn't trust me, right? And so maybe or maybe not their trust was placed in me, but through faith, they could understand that. If somebody goes on a trip and promises they're going to come back, now, of course, we're limited in what we can promise because we're not God. But if they would, and they promised they would come back, you might trust them and say, and look forward, order your life around that, right? And so faith is how we connect to unseen things, And so how we fill in this blank is an issue of faith, no matter how you fill it in. Because you're either connecting to an unseen personal being who existed from eternity past, or you're connecting to organic substances that existed in the unseen past that we don't know exactly what they were. Either way, you're connecting to it by faith. And so we connect to this, as God tells us in Hebrews 13, by faith. By faith we understand this. And Hebrews 11:1 says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for. And so it's not, sometimes we use words like faith and hope and we take the meaning out of them as though like, I just hope this will happen. Or you got to have faith in what? I don't know, just have faith. But when the meaning is in them, you're actually placing trust in someone or something. And so faith actually assures you, gives you hope, gives you strength and assurance of the things that you can't see, but you trust in and that you're hoping for. As we work through the beginning chapter of the Bible here this morning, we're going to see some wonders that we see in creation. If you think about creation, when I just said that phrase, wonders of creation, probably some things started to come to some of your minds already. We sang about some of the wonders of creation earlier. I was sitting here this morning early just thinking through this again. There weren't many cars out because it was pretty early, and I could hear the birds everywhere across the field there. And it was just like overwhelming noise. It was like I had to stop what I was doing and just listen. And there was just something beautiful about that. And that's just my enjoyment of it. Then you think about the function of bird calls, right? And so just think about the wonders of creation. And as we think through this, here's the reality. If we don't attribute the wonder of creation to God, we will attribute it to something. If we don't attribute the wonders of creation to God, we will attribute it to something. And so that something may be chance. We may be attributing it to chance. We may be attributing it to something else. But you're going to attribute it to something. Why is that beautiful? You're going to have some kind of underlying answer to that. And here's what the Bible claims, is if you answer anything other than God, you rob him of his glory, because he's the creator of those things. And creation reveals who he is in its order, in its structure, in its unity, in its diversity. It reveals who God is. There was a biologist and a philosopher in the early 1900s. His name was Herbert Spencer. And he proposed that you can sum everything up that exists in 5 categories. So these are Herbert Spencer's 5 categories of all that's knowable in the natural sciences: time, force, action, space, and matter. And actually, these are still used in explanations and books today. And so time, force, action, space, matter. I just want to see something interesting as we move into Genesis 1 here. When you line this up with the beginning of Genesis chapter 1, and you compare them, here's what we see. In the beginning, that's time. God, that's force. Created, that's an action, right? The heavens, that's space. The earth, that's matter. Isn't that interesting? And so what we observe actually matches up with what we see in the opening lines of the Bible. And it wasn't written down and recorded until the 1900s, but it was always true since the beginning of creation. And we knew it from the time that Moses wrote Genesis 1, and we could hear that and see that in the beginning, that there is time, that there wasn't always time, but now there is. We could see that there's a reason, there's a force, there's something that's powerful and strong to bring what is real into reality. There was an action. When did it happen? There was a time, there was an action when he created in the beginning. The heavens, there is space, that's a reality. And the earth, there is organic material, there is matter. And so the beginning of the Bible starts out this way. And we see that the world that we live in is orderly throughout this passage. It's created, it's intentional, it's cared for, it's reproductive. I went to school, well, one of my college educations is in landscape design, and they pounded two words into us: form and function. Form and function. Not just function, my professor would always say. Because in a landscape design, you can do something functional, but it might not look great. Or you can do something that looks really nice, but then a year later, everything's overgrown and growing together, and it's not very functional for what you need, or it's too close to the house, and so you end up getting all kinds of bugs in the house because they're living right there. And so form and function go together. And so we have on the one hand, creation is just cool to look at, right? But then we have on the other hand, it gives us what we need for life, and it sustains us. And so form and function are all throughout this. And so here's what I want to do today. I just want to work through these things because, as I said, there are things that make us wonder in creation. There are things that make us go, huh, or make us go, wow, or just get our attention. And I've said that we will attribute them to something, either God or to something else. And so let's work through these, and then we can work through one by one and make the choice. Will I worship God because of this? Or will I do something else? Or will I attribute it to something else? So the first one is light, the wonder of light in verses 1 through 4. The wonder of light. And we see it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, or unformed and unfilled. So it was there, but it was like a lump of Play-Doh maybe. It needed the structure still in its original when God first did this on day one. Unformed and unfilled, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Isn't that an amazing sentence? When you really think about it, isn't that an amazing sentence? I hope you do think about that. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Either he is an all-powerful God who can create something out of nothing, as this claims, or he's not. He said, "Let there be light." Now we know there's light, right? We know that there is light. And light is an amazing reality. It travels at 671 million miles per hour. That's pretty fast. Now fathom that. I believe God created the angels first, and so they were probably there celebrating, watching all of this, like, whoa! Now imagine being one of the angels when God was making the earth, and all of a sudden he said light, and at 671 million miles per hour, light! Everywhere, all over the universe. That's amazing. That's a wonder. That's a wonder. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good. He didn't only make light, he actually said and acknowledged, that's good. That's good. Not only is it powerful and cool that just happened, if you're one of the angels there watching, if we got to see it, it was good. See, it's form and function. It's beauty and it's function. It's both. See, it's good, we enjoy it, we celebrate it, but it's functional. It helps us. It helps plants grow. It helps our bodies. There is form and function in this. God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning one day. There was evening and there was morning one day. So that's the first wonder, light. Now, you can do, my goal today is not to give you all kinds of scientific facts and all of that. I'm just here to tell you what God says in his word. But it's fun to just Google this stuff and just say, I did this last week again. So what's so amazing about light? Google it. It's fun. There are a lot of amazing things about just any one of these. And so you can actually dive into this a lot more this week and rejoice a lot more in what God has done in creation. But wonder number 2, because as I said, we have a lot to get through here. So wonder number 2 is verses 6 through 8. The water, and you could, I guess, say 2 or 3, 2 and 3, water and the firmament. Then God said, verse 6, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. Interesting. The waters separated from the waters. Do we have different kind of waters on the planet? We do, don't we? We have salt water, we have fresh water. Aren't you glad it's not all salt water? I sure am. Seems like it's designed. Seems like there's a reason for that. And so God separated the waters. Then, verse 7, God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening, and there was morning a second day. So I've listened to scientists explain this, and they said, basically, imagine living in a greenhouse. And so this was like a water vapor that God kind of separated. So there was constant humidity, and it was a setting in which there could be longevity in life and growth and all of that in the original creation. What about seeds? The wonder of seeds. Verses 9 through 13. Maybe you've contemplated this before, maybe you haven't. Just the wonder of how seeds grow. Some of you plant gardens in the spring, maybe. And so you've grown something from seed, and maybe you've sat there and been like, wow, isn't that amazing that it just works? That I buy the one it's supposed to be, and I get the plant it's supposed to be, and it's orderly according to its kind, and it doesn't end up being something different. And it's worth contemplating these things. Verse 9. Then God said, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas. And so the seeds had somewhere to grow, didn't they? Soil, land, place, not just water. Then God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Verse 11, God said, let the earth sprout vegetation. Plants, notice they're not just plants. Plants yielding seeds. What if the first plants couldn't reproduce? We'd all be in trouble, or we wouldn't be here. Humanity wouldn't have survived that long. Animals wouldn't have survived that long. There would have been nothing to eat. There would have been nothing to temper the heat. There would have been nothing for all of that. And so he made plants that brought forth seed that could reproduce, that could keep growing. So the plants could keep reproducing and fill the earth. And fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind with seed them. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after their kind, and tree fruits bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. There was evening and there was morning, a third day. Notice the pattern there. He does something each day. He's setting up a pattern, and we'll see that as we put all this together here this morning. And so this is the end of the third day, and we saw he put land there, and Proverbs says that Jesus was there, and it says wisdom, but the New Testament tells us Jesus is wisdom. So Jesus was there uniquely celebrating in the habitable spaces. That's pretty cool. You know why? We live on the habitable spaces. And Jesus took a special, unique delight on the land part because we were going to live there. We were made for relationship, right? God made us for that relationship with him. And so this wonder of seeds, the wonder of earth, that there are different kinds of soils that certain seeds grow in that other ones don't. There are some seeds that can somehow grow on this much dust right on top of a boulder. How? I don't know. It's pretty amazing. There are some plants that actually don't need to root into soil at all and just can live with the air and get the nutrients they need from that. How does that happen? I don't know. I mean, I can observe it and explain the processes, but man, the design behind that is incredible. And when we think about that, that reveals something about the one who designed it, doesn't it? Does anybody like to go to museums or to just look at paintings or sculptures or maybe architecture? You like to drive around and look at different architecture? When I do, and maybe you're like me, when I look at a painting, for example, it makes me wonder about the person who painted it. It makes me think about what they were like. Not only do I know there was one because there is a painting, but it makes me wonder what was that artist like? And some paintings are very orderly and some paintings are very not orderly. And some paintings are very precise and show that the artist had patience. And some paintings are more like, kind of quick. They're trying to represent a moment, And so there are different things that you can understand about a creator by what they create. And that is true of God as well. And in the marvel of earth, the marvel of soil, and the marvel of seed, and just Google the germination process this afternoon. It's amazing. There are all kinds of words you'll see, scarification and stratification and all kinds of things that have to happen to a seed coat for the seed to come off, or the coat to come off, and the seed to germinate. It's amazing. It's amazing what has to happen. It's so complex. And that reveals the complexity, I believe, of a wonderfully complex and providing creator. Going on, we see the wonder of the lights. Starting in verse 14. The wonder of, notice this isn't just light. He says lights. Plural, because he already created light, right? And he already separated night from day and darkness from light. And so light was already there in its state without the sun, moon, and stars. How did it have light? We've been talking recently about how God's word tells us there will be a day in the future when Jesus will be the light of the whole world. Wow. Wrap your head around that. So is it possible that will be coming if that already happened? Yeah. And so there was light, and then God started to give this design to it. How is this going to perpetuate? How is this going to work within the universe, within the system, and how it all works together? And so verse 14 picks up, then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day and the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth. And we're told in Isaiah that God knows every single star by name. And that's actually brought to humans to say, why do you think he doesn't care about you? If he knows every single star by name, can he care about you? God is a personal creator, and he created these lights and these systems and these structures, and he saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, a fourth day. And so we see the lights, we see the sun, we see the moon, we see the stars that are put into place and how they function and how they work together and how they're in the sun's in the exact right distance from the earth, and if it was any closer, we'd all be in trouble. And it works all perfectly. But notice something else here. There's something else that makes me wonder. We see patterns of I guess you could say schedules, day and night. Now, we've seen day and night already, but here he brings it out again, and he says, sun is going to govern the day, the moon will govern the night. The greater governs the day, the lesser the night, is the way he said it. And we see this wonder of day and night. And so he talked about how that would be for signs, for seasons, for days, for years. How do we track those things? How do we track days? Calendar, okay. All right. Where did the calendar come from? Why did people think to invent a calendar? I heard some other things. Stars. Yes, people navigate based on the stars, and they can tell seasons based off of the stars. And we can tell, and then the sun, we have a solar calendar. There are also lunar calendars. And so that happened because people observed that what God said was true, and they started to track things right away. The Jewish people that God said this to, started tracking this immediately. And in fact, to this day, many of them still begin their day at sundown. Why is that? Notice what Genesis 1 said. There was evening, then there was morning, day one. Interesting. And so God actually started days. And we can observe how it all works perfectly in terms of the timing of the sun and the earth and the rotation and how that all fits together. But God created this in the unique way. The question is, does that lead you to worship the one who made it, or worship your calendar, for example? That's an interesting question, isn't it? When you look at your schedule, when you look at your calendar, when you engage in that stuff, do you worship? Do you look at that and say, God, thank you for giving us time and giving us ways to track it? We couldn't even meet up with people and make plans, and we couldn't save towards things. We couldn't do all of this without a calendar and without timing and without day and night. So do you look at it that way, or do you look at your calendar as 12 things on one day? Well, maybe when you focus on worshiping, you won't have those 12 things on one day. Maybe God will reorder your priorities in your life. Or, God actually says when you invest in his word in Proverbs, he lengthens your days. I don't know how that works exactly, but I can tell you it's happened in my life, and it's happened in some of your lives that I've talked to, that when we have a lot of things that we're like, I can never get these things done today. There's no way. And you start to freak out and say, I'm not going to. I'm going to trust God. Somehow you get them all done and some. God can do that when we engage in life as worshipers. But if we rob from him the worship that he deserves from that, our lives look very differently. Then we see wonder number 6, the sea creatures and the birds kind of together on day 5. And so this is, you could say wonder number 6 and 7, depending how you're tracking with me here. Then God said, verse 20, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures. Let the birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. There was evening and there was morning, a 5th day. Now, what if the original creatures in the sea were not built to reproduce? We wouldn't know any of that, right? We wouldn't see any of that. The whole ecosystem and everything would function differently. Everything would function differently. But God made this to reproduce and to exist for his purposes so that we could know him. We could have a relationship with him. And so we see the wonder of that. We see not only in the reproduction here, the wonder, we see in the classifications of it. God said after their kind, right? There's an order to it. There's a system to it. Is that what we see? And when we look at animals, when we look at sea creatures? Absolutely we do. It doesn't take you more than 3 seconds to look that up and see that very clearly. There are classification systems because God made them classifiable. That's the way he made them, is that they would reproduce after their own kind. What about the wonder of humanity? The wonder of humanity in verses 26 through 31. The wonder of humanity. I want to read through these verses, but first I want to ask a question that was asked in Psalm 8. What is man that God would take thought of us? Psalm 8, 4, if you're taking notes, asks that question. Out of all of creation, out of all this cool stuff that God made, why is man unique? What is man that you would take thought of us? As this story goes, and as Genesis 1 goes on, we'll read it here, but we see that God gave humans a unique place within the earth, within the universe. And we still see that functioning today, don't we? We see the unique place, the unique capacities that we have that the rest of creation doesn't have, because we were made in God's image. And so there are similarities in the sense of reproducing after our own kind and things like that, because we are created as well. But we are given this unique place. And have you worshiped with that thought recently? God, why are humans unique? Why are we different than everything else? Why do we have the intellectual capacities that we do? Why do we have the sense of morality that we do? Why do we have the capacity for just wonder and awe and staring at something beautiful for hours? Like, why is it? Why is it that we can do that? Who are we that you would pick us out of everything else and give us this unique place made in your image? Let's read it. Starting in verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image. And we see here the second indication of who God is. We kind of zoomed over the first one, that in the beginning we see God creating, we see the Holy Spirit there hovering over the waters. And so the Bible tells us that God is three persons but one God. And so he is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Why would this say, let us make man in our image? Because he is one God who has three personalities within himself. And he was fully satisfied within himself relationally from eternity past. He didn't create out of need. He didn't need us. He created out of the overflow of what was good. Do you see that in the words he used? I saw that, it was good. I made that, it was good. See, it's the overflow of his own goodness that he created. It wasn't to fill a void in his life, but it was to share the joy of relationship that he had within himself. That is why you are made, to know and enjoy a satisfying relationship with your Creator, God. And there is nothing in life that will satisfy you like that will. We can search, we can try, and we sang that earlier, didn't we? And that's the testimony of many, that you've tried. I've searched the world, but it couldn't fill me. It's never enough. Made the Olympics, but I can't. It wasn't what I thought it would be. I finally got drafted into the NBA, but I just still feel empty. I finally married the woman of my dreams, but why do I still feel a void? See, only God can actually make sense of that longing that's deep within us, because we were made in his relational image for a relationship with one who is fully righteous, fully good, fully just, will never let you down. And until you have that relationship with him, you will never be fully satisfied. And so he says, going on in verse 26, let the humans, let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, over all the earth, over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And so this is a special place, as I was saying. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them male and female. He created them. God blessed them, and God said, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." We'll just stop there for now. So there's a description of humanity being made in God's image. And notice it says that it wasn't just man that was made, it wasn't just woman that was made. Man and woman, both made in God's image equally. But we do see man and we do see woman, and so there are unique roles that we each play here that God has given us. And so among humanity, we have this unique place. He says that we would rule over. We would be the ones who can actually help out animals even. And Proverbs talks about that as a part of wisdom. Instead of being mad that an animal's in your way and kicking it, "The dog's in my way, get out of my way." It actually says a wise person will be gentle to creation. And so we're not doing this today, but there is a whole system of teaching and understanding called creation care that's all through the Bible, and God calls us to do that. God calls us to take care of what he made as an act of worship to him, not as an act of fear of what could happen if we don't, but as an act of worship to him and an act of gratitude. And so then it goes on in verse 29, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed. It shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth which has life, I have given every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Notice he even describes that day differently, doesn't he? We do have a unique place by God's design in this creation. And it was very good, it says. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. Some will question whether a day means a day here, or whether we talked about a few weeks ago how sometimes we say back in the day, and I used a bunch of examples, whether it was bell bottoms or stonewashed jeans or whatever it was, but back in the day we used to do this. And so sometimes we use that word that way, but usually the word day just means day, right? It's today, it's tomorrow, that's another day. And you see that pattern here very clearly, don't you? There was evening, then there was morning, first day. There was evening, then there was morning, second day. There was evening, then there was morning, the third day. Clearly, listening to that, it's a day, isn't it? It means a day. It means a 24-hour day as we would look at it. There are a lot of other reasons I can give you why it's that. And if you're really interested, we can talk afterwards. But I'm not going to press into that a lot today unless that's something you're really, really struggling or wrestling with. But God made this in a day. The reason I point that out is because some people will take this and say, well, probably what happened is maybe there was a God and he created the primordial substance that there was and then stepped back and let it do its own thing. All I can say is read what the passage says and tell me if that's the clearest reading of it or if you're reading into it. It says there was evening, then there was morning, day one. There was evening, then there was morning, day two. There was evening, then there was morning, day three. You see, there are days of creation. And so as we come to this, we see all of these wonders, and all of these wonders represent a lot of other little wonders. I've listened to, 4 or 5 audiobooks because I can get through them quicker than reading books to prepare for this. And so when I say I could have made this a science lesson, I could have, but I'm not a scientist. I'm here to tell you what God says. And so I can give you some suggestions on books to read and to look through. But here was the fascinating thing is when you looked into any one of these things and try to wrap your head around the way a cell works, the way a molecule works, the way DNA works, the way RNA works, the way the ecosystem works, the way stars explode, the way you can measure light distances, each of those things, you find a subpoint that's equally fascinating, and then a subpoint that's equally fascinating. And you see the wonders of creation literally to us. I mean, it seems like it has no end, which actually is possible because God has no end, right? Interesting. But we see in chapter 2, verses 1 through 4, and this is where we'll begin to wrap this up here today, the wonder of a completed functioning system. The wonder of a completed functioning system. Chapter 2, verse 1, thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts. By the seventh day, God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which he had created and made. This is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made heaven and earth. And so it says in verse 1 there of chapter 2 that there's a completed system, right? God created the heavens and the earth, and they were completed, and all of their hosts. The universe was done, was prepared in 6 days, and then God rested on the seventh day. Was God tired? Did he need a break after that? No, I don't think that's what's happening here. It says he rested. It doesn't say it was because he was tired. You see, we have sometimes an altered view of what rest is. Rest should be a celebration of completion. It should be a celebration of completion. That's why he rested on the seventh day, just to show the sixth day was the end of creation. Everything was made. The system was there and fully functioning. And then he rested, reflected on it. And it says there, it was from the work which we had done. It was demonstrating that it was completed. And he set it apart. That's what the word sanctified in verse 3 means. He made this day unique. And so he's creating a pattern here of 6 days and then a day of rest. 6 days and then a day of rest. And so this is not saying you're going to get really tired and that's why you need rest, although we do. But rest takes on a different meaning when you're celebrating the completion of something. And that's what it's intended to be, where we go to bed and it's like, look what God did in my life today. And you lay down and you're like, oh, this is good. It's not going to bed and escaping from the day because the day was too overwhelming. And I'm just going to go to bed 4 hours early today because today was too overwhelming. You see the difference? One follows the pattern of celebrating completion that God laid down for us. The other one might simply be escapism or fear. And so we see in all of this, we can respond to each of these by engaging in a lifestyle of worship or by ignoring the one who created us and just living in the wonderful spread he laid out for us called creation and just ignoring him on the regular pattern of day-to-day life. What will you do? Will you engage in life and see each of these things? This is something to think about. You can go back through these this week and meditate on it. When I engage in this, and I gave 2 clear ones with the calendar, how do you do it? Is it an act of worship? When you go to bed at night, when you rest, and this shows on the 7th day, do you take time at the end of your week to say, God, what have you done in my life this week? Just sit back, rest, take some time. Maybe go for a hike, go for a walk, do something you enjoy, and just rest, because the world can go on without you. But we don't always believe that because we don't always take some time every Saturday to tell ourselves that, right? And we can do all kinds of weird things with the Bible and this doctrine and everything, but it's that simple. Do you take time every Saturday to rest and reflect and say, God, you can do all this without me. You're God, I'm not. And look at what you did in my life this last week. And respond and engage in worship. Because when we reflect on this, there's 2 things I want us to take away today. Number 1, if God truly is our creator, then I am accountable to him. And so are you, if you're his creation. If God truly is our creator, as he claims, as his word claims to us, then I am accountable to him. I know we've been going through a lot of verses today, and I want to go through another section just to kind of build this out. And then after this, we'll spend about 1 minute on the last point. So hang in there with me. But if God truly is the creator, then I'm accountable to him. Let's look at Romans 1, starting in verse 18. Romans 1, starting in verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which is known about God is evident within them. For God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his attributes, his eternal power, and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. For even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man and of birds and of four-footed animals and crawling creatures. Therefore, God gave them over to their lusts of their heart, to impurity, so that their bodies would be dishonored among them. You see, when we don't honor God, it's actually dishonor to us. And the way we live, even our bodies and the way we function in this world, will be less than we were created for in God's image. But, verse 25, they exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the creator. But he's the one who's blessed forever. For this reason, God gave them over to their degrading passions. For their women exchanged the natural function for that which is unnatural. And in the same way, also the men abandoned their natural function of the women and burned in their desire toward one another, men with men committing indecent acts and receiving in their own persons the due penalty of their error. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God any longer, God gave them over to a depraved mind to do the things which are not proper, being filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, they not only do the same, but also give hearty approval to those who practice them. Take a breath. There's a lot in there. I only read it to make this very clear. If God truly is our creator, I am accountable to him. And so are you. And life doesn't work the way it should for you when you reject him as creator. And you know that. There's a lack, a longing, a void in your life that can only be satisfied in that relationship with him. And there is a whole listing of different things that are errant, that are not from recognizing who he is. And it covers every single one of us in this room. Every single one who's sitting at home right now listening. This covers all of us. And the call to all of that is that they just did not honor him. They just didn't recognize that he was the one who created. They look at the stuff, and instead of wondering and taking each wonder and say, wow, why does it work that way? God must be amazing. We say, wow, why does it work that way? Dust is amazing. And we give the honor that God deserves to the dust we walk on, or to the bodies we live in, or to the air we breathe. We worship the creature rather than the creator, he says. And I hope we hear this the way we're called to today, that we will see these as opportunities for wonder when we observe these things and give God the glory and worship that he deserves. And so here's the second thing that I said would just take a minute. If I've truly been reconciled to the Creator, then I have a reason to hope. What we read in Romans doesn't leave you hopeful. When we reject the Creator, it leaves you hopeless. But if you have truly been reconciled, that no matter what you've done, no matter what wrongs you've done, no matter where you've been, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is, God can forgive that sin. And he can reconcile to you because he loved you enough to send his son to die for you on the cross, to raise again, to show that when he forgives you, it's real and it changes you and it will make the difference for all of eternity, and you have reason to hope for all of eternity. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Anybody else feel like singing? Let's stand and sing together.